We have more for your ears only. I'm Katherine Herzog.
I'm David Alpern with this quote from the news. Of all the forms of inequality, injustice in healthcare is the most shocking and inhumane. That was Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein quoting Martin Luther King Jr. in advance of MLK Day holiday and promising, quote, expanded and improved Medicare for all. Now this. Rosebud.
Get back. Don't smoke.
I'd like to say thank you on behalf of the group and ourselves, and I hope we pass the audition.
Here, at the age of 39, I began to be old.
Question. What do Orson Welles' single most famous word in movies, the last public performance of the Beatles, and the opening lines of British TV's Brideshead Revisited have in common? Answer, Michael Lindsay-Hogg. The veteran actor, director, created the Beatles' rooftop concert to end his film about them, Let It Be. He was also the initial director of Brideshead, as well as Whose Life Is It Anyway? And Agnes of God on Broadway. And Welles was the great good friend of his beautiful actress mother, Geraldine Fitzgerald, and, as long rumored, Michael's secret father.
Contending with and confirming those rumors is a leitmotif of Lindsay-Hogg's recent memoir, Luck and Circumstance, a coming-of-age in Hollywood, New York, and points beyond from Alfred Knopf. But the book is full of intriguing insights and encounters with generations of other entertainment VIPs, from Bogart and Bardot to those Beatles, the easier-to-work-with Rolling Stones, AIDS playwright Larry Kramer, Laurence Olivier, Geraldine Page, Jeremy Irons, and Amanda Plummer, to name just a few. And to talk about what he learned from and about them all, and about himself, for your ears only, we're pleased to have Sir Michael Lindsay-Hogg on the line now. Welcome to our show.
David, thank you. And Catherine, great introduction.
You were smitten by your mother's profession even before you knew of the rumors about your natural father and his preeminent place in it. Talk about what hooked you and when.
What hooked me, David, was I wasn't really good for anything in the normal world, I don't think. I grew up as a very out-of-it kid. I couldn't read till I was 9. I was fat, I was bullied, I was squashed. I was deeply, deeply unhappy. And then one day when I was 14, my mother asked me if I'd like to come down and watch her rehearse an off-Broadway play. And I did. I went down there, and the actors were very nice to me. They made me feel included. They made me feel there was a world that I maybe could do something in. I didn't know what it was going to be. The director of that off-Broadway show was the very young Sidney Lumet. And he gave me my first job for $1 a day on the weekend, being on the book in case the actors forgot their lines. And immediately I felt there was a kind of home. And I've never really left it. I've never earned a penny in my life which has not been in the theater or the movies or television or something like that.
Mm-hmm. And how did you come to rock and roll on TV and those early music videos?
I got lucky, and then when I was only 24 years old, I was directing a live television rock and roll show in England called Ready, Steady, Go. And it was during the great rock and roll boom. It was 1965. And the regular bands on the show were the Rolling Stones and the Who and the Kinks and visiting Americans, Roy Orbison and the Supremes, etc. And I was good. I directed the show well. The bands liked the look. They liked the way they were shot and everything like that. And as a result of that, I was asked to do really the earliest videos. The Beatles used to watch the show, and they asked me to do Paperback Writer and Rain, and then later Hey Jude and Revolution, and the Rolling Stones asked me to do Jumping Jack Flash. And it was really as a result of this show and the early friendships I made with the bands. But the interesting thing was we were all more or less the same age. I mean, I'm 3 years older than Jagger. I'm the same age as John Lennon would have been. So we knew what was going on in the world at that time.
Talk about the difference between working with what many fans considered the sweet Beatles versus those defiantly nasty Rolling Stones.
Well, the Beatles weren't actually all that sweet. They were tough. They were made sweet by Brian Epstein and those cute little suits they wore when they first started out, and their little bumped up Fab Four haircuts. But they were tough. They came from Liverpool, as you know, which was a tough blue-collar port city in the north of England. They didn't come from a privileged background at all. They had to listen. They played all-nighters in Hamburg when they were 17 or 18 years old, drink drugs, rock and roll. They learned the hard way. the Rolling Stones, I've always thought the difference slightly was that the Rolling Stones came from the big metropolis, London, or near enough to it. They'd had a different background. They were slightly more middle class than the Beatles had been. And Mick Jagger, as you know, went to the London School of Economics for 2 years. And they all had interest beyond rock and roll as well as rock and roll. Charlie Watts has always been interested in clothes. The Rolling Stones drummer, he says he supports all the tailors in the West End. And Mick Jagger is incredibly well-read and was at the age of 21. Not to say the Beatles aren't, but I think it was the Stones came from the great big city and had that sophistication and didn't come up with their fists, and the Beatles had much more come up with their fists.
I'm old-fashioned, and I don't mind it, as Mercer and Kern once wrote, so I was equally fascinated by your first and second-hand encounters with stars of an earlier age, like Humphrey Bogart, anxious about his career in general, and one particularly chaotic picture in particular.
Yeah, my mother had been at Warner Brothers at the same time as Humphrey Bogart and the other actors, and my mother was, she and he had been in Dark Victory together with Bette Davis and Ronald Reagan. It was a pretty good cast. And he was worried about his career. He thought he'd never really make it. He was pushing 40, and he thought his time was over. And then he was doing a movie after that, and they were on the lot, and they were having lunch in the commissary together, my mother and Ingrid Bergman and Humphrey Bogart. And Ingrid Bergman and Humphrey Bogart were saying the movie they were shooting at the time, they didn't understand it, it didn't have a good ending, and they were sure it would end up in the dustbin. And, of course, the movie was Casablanca.
Orson Welles gave you some early experience in the theater, but then drifted in and out of your life, only occasionally, almost accidentally. Did you come to think he was embarrassed, or just didn't want to overshadow or handicap your career with any hint of favoritism or nepotism?
Whatever the connection between Orson and my mother was, and I think the book gives pretty good evidence of what it probably was, he was astoundingly irresponsible in pretty much all of his intimate connections, especially with the children. He was really in and out of their lives. Sometimes he would say, I'll see you next week, and then the child wouldn't hear from him for a year. But I think as far as personal relationships were concerned, he was not good at it.
And in the end, do you think all those rumors helped or hurt your career?
Well, they've been around for such a long time. I don't know. They were kind of like, wasps on a summer day. They're just around to annoy you or not.
Actor-director Michael Lindsay-Hogg's memoir is Luck and Circumstance from Knopf. Next, the sexy side of an iron lady, for your ears only.